Okay, so we're going to be going through information regarding the drone project, and I think for the most part you'll be able to just sit back and watch, and I'll mention if there's something very specific that needs to be noted down or you really need to remember, it's quite important or something like that. For now, just watch, I think. So this is the drone. These are the racing quadcopter style drones. It's quite popular at the moment, and you can get an idea of size. I mean, this is the smaller one, and the bigger one. They're the exact same technology, exact same design, exact same approach. The way you would build this one is the exact same way you'd build this one. In fact, they share the same electronic board inside that they use for the brain. It's the exact same brain. The only difference is they have bigger motors and the frame's bigger. So we'll be looking at the big one because this is the one you should be getting. And what you're going to start with would be the frame itself. And the frame basically comes as a bunch of flat panels. The arms are all separate, and the body panels are all separate as well. And you should get an instruction manual, something like this. It's kind of the usual IKEA build it yourself, figure it out, Meccano style approach, and you can't really get anything wrong. If you assemble something in the wrong way, you just dismantle it and start over. Screws, just tighten all the screws. I have the nuts facing down on the bottom of the drone for the arms, so I always tighten from the top down, screw from the top down and with the nut on the bottom. But that's just preference from my side. And what you can probably do is, this is a top panel that has these rubberized little pads, and what that's for is for GoPro action camera mounts on top of the drone. We do not need it, so you can just leave it out. You can just remove it or not install it in the first place. My recommendation is finger tighten everything, and you don't really need to put the top panel on quite yet because we're going to need to get inside. But if you want to get an idea of how the drone assembles, then finish it off, build it up properly, and then you can take the panel off a bit later. You're going to need some Allen keys for all of this as well. Moving on from that, you're going to need to do... Why is it defocusing? Let's get focused. Okay, so we're going to have the motors are going to be the next thing you're going to need to look at. And the way the motors come, they come in these little boxes, one motor per box. I did at one point get a box like this that actually came with 4 motors inside. So just have a look, and inside you should get the motor with maybe a tool or two to attach the motor and maintain the motor, as well as a bunch of screws. So this is important. When you're attaching the motor, on the bottom there's 4 screw holes. When you're attaching it to the actual drone itself, you can see over here there's 4 screws that attaches the motor to the actual arm. Use the shortest screws that they provide in these kits. They usually give 3 different length screws. Okay, I messed up 4 of these motors because I tightened long screws that pushed into the motor enclosure and actually damaged the coils inside. As a result, I broke all 4 motors and I had to buy all of them again. This is the most expensive part of the drone, so use the shortest screws possible. And again, finger tight. They don't have to be overly tightened or anything like that. Have a look at the motors. If they have a direction on it, you'll see there's like an arrow kind of on the motor. If there's no indication as to which direction the motors turn, then skip this next piece. But if there is some indication on how the motors turn, then you need to understand this is the motor, this is the drone facing towards you. These red propellers are the back propellers, okay? These are at the back of the drone. So the drone's flying that way, forward. The back propellers need to come in to the center. They need to rotate this way. So in and out, in and out, in and out. That's the direction they need to rotate. And the front motors need to rotate into the drone and around, into the drone and around. Okay, come back to this video if you really need a reference, or you can find any of these charts online, but this is quite a common thing. This side is that way, this side is that way. Okay, and just mount the motors accordingly on the corners of the drone, and use the shortest screws you can. Next will be what we call ESC, the ESCs, and these are electronic speed controllers. If you look at the motors, they come with 3 generic wires on them. Okay, 3 generic black wires. There isn't such a thing as a positive and a negative in the typical sense of positive and negative wires. They all double as a positive and a negative. Each of these become at some point a positive wire, and they can become at some point a negative wire, depending on what the ESC is doing to it. So basically what the ESC is going to do, and the ESC looks something like this. It's a little block board with 3 generic black wires coming out the one side, which will go to our 3 generic black wires on the motor. You can either solder it there if the wires aren't on the ESC, but this is quite straightforward. You can't get these wrong either. The only thing that'll happen if you get these wires the wrong way around from the ESC to the motor is the motor will spin in a different direction. So the main thing is just to wire the wires straight, and if something goes wrong, just turn the two of the wires around. Just swap 2 of the wires around. But there's nothing that can really go wrong. We always change it in software later as well. Then on this side of the ESC, electronic speed controller, there's a black and a red wire, and this will go to the actual battery essentially, and that's where the power for the motors will be coming from. And this little servo wire, and I'll go through this information a little bit more later, but the little servo wire with a little block connector on the end has a little white and black cable, and this will be going to the brain to control the ESC, and in turn the ESC will be controlling the motor. So what the ESC is basically doing is it's trying to tell the motor at exactly which time the inside parts of the motor needs to swap over, and how fast they need to be swapping over to be able to allow the motor to really turn, to basically speed it up or slow it down. So it's controlling the inner workings of the motor. So what you're going to have essentially is you're going to have a motor with an ESC, a motor to an ESC, and then the wires are going to go inside the body. You're going to have another one, a motor and an ESC, and the wire is going to go inside. So you can see the ESC on the arm. And every arm is going to have a motor and an ESC, and you would obviously attach the motors with screws, and keeping the propellers off. The propellers will be the last thing that go onto the drone, just for safety purposes, because we'll be testing the motors spinning, and if the motors are spinning with propellers in it, the drone will obviously take off, and it could be quite dangerous. It will be quite dangerous. The ESCs you can attach, I use double-sided foam tape. You can use cable ties, hot glue, whatever you think will work. Get creative there. A lot of the stuff that you'll find with the drones is that it's a bit kind of DIY. Yep. I think that's going to be it for this video. I'll do another one with the next steps.